All right, it's 7 o'clock Central Time. I'd like to go ahead and get the meeting started. This is the next seminar in the 2021 Let's Ride seminar series with NATRC. We still have a few people signing up, but I think we'll go ahead and get started. Our speaker tonight is Paula Riley. She has been with NATRC since the 1980s. She's lost track of how many rides that she's managed. She's served in every role in NATRC ride management in both Regions 4 and Regions 5. She's mentored many ride managers, trail masters, secretaries. She served on the regional boards in Region 4 and Region 5. She has more than 15,000 competitive miles herself. And her horse, Road Swiss Mocha, had over 11,000 competitive miles, won the President's Cup, and was introduced and is in the and is also in the Horse Hall of Fame. She's also received the Jim Menefee Lifetime Achievement Award in 2014. With that, Paula, I'd like to let you get started on this webinar.
Okay, thank you, Bill. And thank you to all who have called in for your interest in how rides are managed here in NATRC. Okay, so we'll get started. So what's needed to get started? First, you need a ride manager interested in taking on the task of managing a ride. Then you need to find a site that has enough trail and facilities willing to host the ride. This might be a national or state forest campground with horse trails, a private equine facility with sufficient trail, and you do need at least about 20 miles of trail, or some combination of these. Here in Region 5, we found that host sites with full trailer hookups are better attended than those in primitive camping locations. So once you have the manager and the location, you need to get with the regional scheduling coordinator to identify what dates are available on the ride calendar. Generally, established rides automatically have the same dates each year unless they actively release them. Also, you need to look at obtaining any permits or permissions needed for the host site. This generally applies to national and state forest horse trails and campgrounds. So now you have a manager and a location and a date. What's next? You need to put together your management team. There are 3 people who form the core of this team. There's the ride manager, who's the head of the team, coordinates activities, and is the captain of this ship. The trail master determines what trails to use, makes the maps, and escorts the judges to the observation points. The ride secretary handles the documentation and paperwork, including the NATRC's ride management system, which we affectionately call the RMS. These 3 individuals need to work closely together as they manage the bulk of the work involved in putting on an NATRC ride. Insofar as paperwork is concerned, everything starts with obtaining a sanction from NATRC. The guidelines for sanctions and many ride forms can be found at natrc.org. To access the ride management documentation and forms, you need to be a member of NATRC and have created a log-on at natrc.org. Once you log on, if you select the admin tab, then from the drop-down, select ride management. And this opens up a wealth of help information that NATRC provides to all their ride managers. The ride management manual is the first thing you see when logging on to the ride management section of the website. This manual is very comprehensive. It includes everything needed for the ride, including the roles and responsibilities of the various individuals involved. Looking down further in the website, you'll find the various documents and forms needed to put on a ride. These have been nicely grouped according to whether they are used before, during, or after the ride. So back to where I was. Everything starts with obtaining the sanction from NATRC. Included with the sanction, you're going to want to send a ride information sheet that details all the information on the ride, including the location, dates, contacts, divisions, and fees, camping and trail information, and any other special notes. Once the sanction has been issued, you can turn your focus to finalizing any permitting needed, obtaining insurance, and making application for grant monies available from NATRC. Now comes the hunt for judges. Every traditional NATRC ride needs two: a vet judge who focuses on the horse, and the horsemanship judge who focuses on the rider. The leisure division only has one judge who focuses on the horse and rider as a team. NATRC provides a list of approved judges on the website. In addition to availability, some considerations when selecting a judge is transportation expense to get them to the ride, their housing needs at the ride, and their per horse fees. There is a limited number of judges available, so finding a judge while keeping costs down can be a challenging exercise. The management team is going to need the help of additional volunteers at the ride. Key positions include the rules interpreter, who monitors the ride to address any issues with the rules that might come up, and files a report to NATRC after the ride is over. The P&R coordinator, who's in charge of training and supervising the various volunteers that work with the P&Rs. The safety coordinator, who follows along behind the riders on the trail to deal with any first aid or other safety issues that might come up. The judge's secretary, and I strive to have two for each judge, is responsible for recording the judge's observations onto the scorecards. And the timer, who's responsible for timing the riders in and out and adjusting for any management holdups. The ride manager is generally the main contact for the host facility in order to obtain information for the ride info sheet and to organize camping and lodging for certain management positions and judges. The ride is required by the rules to house the judges and rules interpreter. In addition, it is traditional for the ride to pay for camping for the following: ride manager, ride secretary, and trail master. It's optional for the ride to pay for camping fees for P&R, safety coordinators, or others. The ride manager needs to assess the host facility for management needs and make any appropriate reservations. As I said earlier, the ride is required to provide camping and housing for key volunteers and judges. Depending upon what the facility offers and what the needs are, lodging might include a campsite, a cabin, a motel, a private home. In addition to housing individuals, certain members of the management team, like the trail master or safety coordinator, may need lodging for their equines. This might be a paddock, a stall, or a picket line. The ride manager is responsible for identifying these camping and lodging needs for the ride, making the necessary reservations, and paying for it at the end of the ride. Minimizing lodging costs is a key focus in the budgeting, and we will talk about budgeting later. The ride needs to be prepared to provide meals for certain key individuals and volunteers. As a ride manager, I can't deal with food. I'm looking early on for someone to coordinate the meals. In addition to the judges, it's traditional for the ride to feed other key workers, such as the rules interpreter, P&R, safety coordinators, and others. Some rides actually feed all volunteers all weekend. This can be a major expense for the ride, and it is common to have potluck dinners either on Friday or Saturday night or both. With everyone bringing a dish, the variety is large and management only has to provide the dry goods and drink jugs. Because of the cost, breakfast and lunch is generally offered only to the judges, their secretaries, and key management. Meal coordinator is a very important position. Delegate, delegate, delegate. NATRC uses an access database to track information on the rides, riders, equines, and workers. This includes everything from entries to results from the various events. It is located at rms.natrc.net. Needless to say, this is a complex program with many layers of access and permissions depending upon individual needs. When going into the RMS, the riders only see the tab focused on the horse rider profiles, ride information, and capturing their entries. Ride management has access to additional tabs where ride specific information is entered and managed. There are RMS administrators and various NATRC data coordinators that have access to additional tabs within this system. Within the ride management team, 2 individuals have the most interaction with the RMS. These include the ride manager. She sets up the ride in the system, uploads the ride information, and opens the ride for entry. The ride secretary, in turn, manages the entries in the system and uses this information to create the scorecards and make the judges' notebooks. Each region has an RMS support person to help with the system. Some regions manage information at the rides manually. Here in Region 5, we download the RMS onto a laptop, which we use to update registrant information at check-in. Using the downloaded version of the RMS in this manner ensures that any errors identified at check-in will be captured when the database is uploaded back into the master system. We also use this downloaded version to prevent a variety of updated reports, in particular the daily rider list that is provided to judges, P&R, and safety coordinators every morning. The downloaded part of the RMS can even create placing sheets for awards. However, most judges still prefer to do this manually. This means that the award information will need to be keyed into the master database at a later date. NATRC uses information from the master database to calculate fees, track placings for national awards, and mileage for both the horse and the rider. The ride secretary is a very busy person. I think the ride secretary bears more of the work than the ride manager does. In addition to handling the RMS, he or she prepares the rider packets, including the agenda, the halter rider tags, the calls for stabling, the agenda, the treats, and other things that go in the rider bags. The ride secretary prepares the waiver notebooks for all to sign, riders and workers. The secretary labels and assembles the scorecards for each rider into the judge's books and orders them according to the rider number. The secretary assembles packs for each judge to house the supplies that the judges and their secretaries are going to need throughout the weekend. Secretary greets and checks in the riders at the ride, including helping the weighmaster determine appropriate classes for new riders. The secretary tracks no-shows and pulls and prints and distributes that rider list at the start of every day. And then she gets to assist with the award ceremony at the end of the ride. Very busy person. The ride manager, let's go to the Bill. Bill, there, I want to go to budgets.
Okay. Financials.
One more. Yeah. There we go. Here we go. The ride manager is responsible for all the financial aspects of the ride. Therefore, it is vital that the manager makes and follows a budget. This budget is based on the entry fees charged, the number of entries expected, and the anticipated expenses. Big expense items include the judge's fees and travel expenses, management, camping and lodging costs, meals, and NATRC fees. The ride manager needs to have a clear budget to know what to charge for the classes and how many riders they need in order for the ride to break even. Rides frequently hold raffles and fundraisers or request donations to help with some of the financials. Also, NATRC has a fund that offers a $1,000 grant for rides to help with upfront expenses. The ride manager coordinates with the trail master to determine what routes the riders will use, the timing of that route, and providing maps to the riders and key workers. The map should include point-to-point distances, minimum and maximum ride times, and speeds. Water spots and other key landmarks on the maps are a plus. While not required, some rides provide point-to-point times as well as the distances on the maps. It is helpful to provide P&R crews with a street map for their location and the approximate time when the riders should arrive. In addition, a confidential plan and map for judging locations is handy for the trail master and ride manager to use as reference. Logistics is the UPS of the ride. In order to plan for judging observations, the ride manager needs to know when the riders within their 30-minute window will be where on the trail. Logistics information is needed to identify where there is access to the trail. Where can you get the judges in? When can the judges be gotten in front of the riders? And what is the travel time from one observation to the next? Generally, the first observation happens shortly after camp. Then you can count on roughly one per hour or 5 or 6 observations per day. Certain things need to happen to ensure that the ride proceeds according to the logistical plan. First, the riders need to be told to stay within their 30-minute window at briefing. They need to understand that if they miss observations because they are outside their window, points will be assessed. Second, judges' observations must not hold up the riders, particularly early in the ride. This creates a widening of that 30-minute window and messes up the logistics the rest of the day. Go ahead, Bill. So you've got your volunteers lined up, judges under contract, trails and timing determined, entries are pouring in. What's next? Well, NATRC wants a progress report to make sure that what you have in place complies with the rules and requirements. This report is called a 6-week report because it's due at least 6 weeks before the start of the ride. In addition to summarizing the ride information, the name, region, location, and dates, this report identifies the key management individuals and judges by name. There's a checklist of important activities such as obtaining insurance, timing mileage, how transportation of judges will be handled, and the number of planned observations. Also, it ensures that there's a vet and farrier assigned to be available at the ride. Finally, this form requires detailed information on the mileage for each division, the number of P&Rs, the average pace, and the elapsed time for the various divisions, minimum, mid, and max. Upon approval of this progress report, NATRC will send scorecard sheets to the ride secretary so she can prepare the judges' books. An important part of the ride manager's duties is to chair the ride briefings. Components include welcoming and introducing the management people, the ride secretary, who's the trail master, the rules interpreter, P&R, and safety coordinators. Then there's an introduction of the judges, which is generally followed by comments from them on their expectations for the weekend. Often first-time competitors are recognized and asked to stand. Campground rules are reviewed. And then the floor is given over to the trail master for a review of the maps. It's nice to keep the briefing short, especially on Saturday night when the riders are tired. Okay, Bill, go to the trail master. The trail master's job as briefing is to go over the maps in detail. Trail instructions, including point-to-point distances, sometimes point-to-point times, minimum, maximum ride times, lunch instructions if applicable, water spots and other landmarks, any pre-ride instructions from the management or the judges, hold criteria at the P&Rs, any post-ride instructions from management or the judges, and the requirement to stay within that 30-minute window to help facilitate the logistics of getting the judges in front of the riders. Another important part of the ride manager's duties is chairing the award ceremonies. Preparing the awards in advance by laying them out on tables helps facilitate their being passed out. This can be done while the judges are finalizing their placings. When the horn is blown and the riders assemble, judges should be allowed to summarize the day and/or the weekend. To facilitate the passing out of the awards, it's helpful to have at least 2 individuals along with the judge assisting. One person to read the results to the group, second person to gather the ribbons or awards for the placing being announced and handing these to the judge, and then the judge to hand the award to the competitor and congratulate them on their achievement. There are a number of activities needed to prepare for the final reports needed by NATRC. Scoring sheets and placing sheets need to be checked before forwarding to NATRC. The results need to be checked and keyed into the RMS. Once NATRC is notified that all of this is complete, they will pull the final reports directly from the ride management system. An additional key report comes from the rules interpreter, and this report should be sent in promptly after the ride. Once all of this is complete, NATRC will notify the ride manager, who's responsible for sending in the required NATRC fees. While the purpose of the event is a competition, it doesn't hurt to integrate a little fun into the weekend. Perhaps you can have a ride theme, a Halloween or 4th of July. Or maybe you can benefit a charity, Girl Scouts or Backwoods Horsemen. Or perhaps you could just do something specific to your ride, hide some golden horseshoes on the trail. I like lollipop loops, and at the end of the loop, there's a basket full of goodies. Signs along the trail highlighting something amusing about a horse or a rider. My horse's name is Rusty. And I'll never forget going by that sign saying, "Hey, Rusty, need some WD-40? Games and puzzles and things like this just help liven things and help make what we do fun. So the ride manager is like a conductor for an orchestra. His job is not to do everything, but to help guide others in getting things done. Tips for success include delegate, delegate, delegate. Find those good volunteers for key positions. Let them do their thing. Provide support when they need it. Having good volunteers makes things go much smoother. That being said, if it can go wrong during the ride, it will. Recognize that everything will not go perfectly. Handle things as they come up. Do the best you can and roll with the punches. And try to relax and have fun. You've done all this preparation. You've done all this work in advance. And now it's time to relax and let the performance happen. If you have fun, everybody else will have fun too. I've mentioned useful resources throughout the presentation. This is just a summary. There's the www.natrc.org where you can sign in and get access to the ride management documents. It's nice because the forms that are on this website are always the latest forms, and these forms are not static. They do change as things change within NATRC. There's a current copy of the ride management manual in there, and a copy of the rule book and drug appendices. All useful information to have. In summary, I'd like to end with a review of what all's involved in managing an NATRC competition. You determine the ride date and location. You determine the key management team, the ride manager, the ride secretary, the trail master. You obtain the sanctions, insurance, and facility permits. You develop, monitor, and update budgets and financials. You secure judges. You seek key volunteers for rules interpreter, judges, secretaries, PNRs, safety, and meal coordinators. You compose a ride information sheet. You determine the trail, prepare the maps, and time the ride. Enter and update information into the RMS as needed. Send in that all-important 6 weeks report for NATRC. Prepare the ride agenda for the weekend. Coordinate preparation activities with the others, the ride manager, the ride secretary, the trail master, meal coordinator, and others. Welcome riders the day of the ride. Welcome volunteers. Provide them with instructions and equipment of what they need for the weekend. Chair the ride briefings. Monitor the riders on the trail. Transport judges. Troubleshoot any issues. Chair the awards. Have fun. And finally, send in those reports to NATRC.
We have a quick question, Paula, from Christian Johansson. Can normal members get access to the admin tab to see the rule book? I think she meant the ride management book. Or do you have to be a registered manager?
You do not have to be a registered manager. You just have to be a member of NATRC. If you're a member of NATRC, you log into the website. You have to log in order to see that tab. So that means you have to have login credentials. But once you're logged in, then you can open up and see those things.
If anybody else has questions, go ahead and type them in the question and answer window on your in your Zoom meeting. Paula, we also received some additional questions in advance. If you could read those off and give your responses to those now, that would be great as well.
Okay. The first question that we had come in was, what are some of the greatest challenges and how do you respond to them? And my response to that is there are a lot of challenges, from obtaining judges to volunteers to weather factors. But if I were to key in on the top two greatest challenges, the first one would be financial viability. This is why I maintain this strict budget and control expenses and conduct marketing to get as many competitors as possible. Once I reach my magic break-even point, then I kind of relax that budget a little bit and add extras in there. But until I reach that magic break-even point for riders' entries, I'm pretty tight with the budget in managing everything. The second biggest challenge I consider is weather, because it affects attendance and can adversely affect the trails. To remedy this as much as possible, I assume that it's going to be pouring down rain over the competition weekend, and plan accordingly. So when I look at the trails, I look at what is this trail going to look like in the pouring down rain? You know, when I look at this ride briefing, can I provide some cover for everybody if it's pouring down rain? When the judges are checking riders in and out, what kind of cover can I give them if it's pouring down rain? If the weather cooperates, this is non-event, but at least I've planned for what I can do.
All right, we have some additional questions from Kristen Johansson again. How many volunteers in all does it take at a typical ride?
20 to 30. If you're looking at a traditional NATRC ride and expecting 30 to 40 competitors, you're generally going to need in the neighborhood of 20 volunteers.
And just as a side comment, what would those different duties be? How many safety riders would you expect? PNR riders?
Yeah, you want 3 or 4 PNR teams. The more the merrier. But and a team is generally 2 people. So you know there's 8 people in PNRs. You want 2 or 3 safety riders behind the novice division, novice CP division. You want 2 or 3 behind the open division. So there's another 6 volunteers. I like to have an assistant meal coordinator, and in addition to the others that I've mentioned, you know, like the ride secretary and those positions.
Another question, related question from Karen Smart. What are the qualifications for safety riders?
I would have to go to the management manual and look it up. Generally, from my perspective, when I look at a safety rider, I'm looking for an experienced horse that is going to be a steady Eddie on the trail. I know stallions are prohibited from riding safety. I'm looking for a rider that maybe has some first aid experience and that sort of thing. A safety horse needs to be able to carry somebody double. You might have to lead somebody out. Oh, gee, I don't know. That's all I can think of.
Yeah, I think those were the key points. Also, the safety riders, they'll carry a first aid pack. Also, kind of in today's world, just a cell phone and 911 and other emergency ability to get a hold of other people in an emergency. And
that's correct. Communication is a big thing. There are a few ride sites that don't have cell phone service, but in today's world of cell phones, it's communication is so much easier than it was years ago. But it is important that they be able to get 911 quickly, to get the ambulance trailer out to where the horse might be, and that sort of thing. Region 5 maintains safety packs of each group of safety riders, the ones behind novice CP and the ones behind open, each have a pack full of safety supplies. We also have a colic kit that's maintained in camp to handle any colic issues we might have with horses in camp.
And I assume that you would assume that we'd have the same number and qualifications for safety riders in LED and leisure.
Yes, yes, I would. We wouldn't need as many in LED. The pace is slower. There's only one division. I would think that 2 or 3 safety riders in an LED ride would be sufficient.
You may not have the answer for this, and I'll probably have to look it up. Catherine McCord asked, I recently downloaded a copy of the ride management manual. It is dated 2017 and doesn't include the leisure and doesn't include leisure division. Will it be, or has it been updated? I do believe that's the most current online. I can't check right now.
Bill, Bill, I believe you're correct. I believe that is the most recent one. Here in Region 5, I have prepared a little leisure division management guide. I would be happy to share that with someone. They just contact me on my email.
Yeah, as I as well in Region 3 have put together an Excel spreadsheet for kind of key tasks during the day, and based on the number of riders, when things will likely happen during the day to help you set up your schedule. Again, I'm happy to share that with people. Kristen Johansson again asked, how do you advertise a ride to maximize entries?
We here in Region 5, we have a marketing coordinator, Chris Gray, who does a great job of putting stuff out on Facebook. We also often reach out to local clubs and websites in the area of the ride to advertise. Putting out flyers in the ride location is always a good thing to do. We try to keep the ride front and center as much as possible. Facebook is a key place.
Next question. When you say you need 20 to 30 volunteers for a ride, is that for each day?
Pretty much. Not so much on Friday. Definitely Saturday and Sunday, a good chunk of Sunday.
I'll just throw in an additional comment. Sometimes when I put on a ride, you'll often have 20 or 30 at least 30 volunteers. And some of those volunteers might be helping you ribbon and de-ribbon. And so you may have a few that are not there on the ride weekend, but it does take quite a few people on the ride weekend to put on one of these events. Bobby Fields again asked if you go over the specific duties of the ride secretary. I'm going to back up to that page.
Bobby, we're planning a ride secretary webinar, and I more than what is here, I would like to ask you just to hold tight until we get that other webinar up. Another place to go to look for ride secretary duties is to go into that management manual. There's probably 5 or 6 pages of ride secretary duty information. I also have a cheat sheet. When I manage a ride, it's about 3 pages of my expectations for a ride secretary, what I would like them to do for me. And again, I would be happy to share that with you if you just email me.
Okay. Bob Insko from Region 2, he commented that they rarely have more than 10 volunteers at a ride. I will comment that particularly like at leisure rides or at smaller rides, it's possible to get by with a fewer number of volunteers. But it's as the numbers go, particularly as the competition ride numbers go up, the number of volunteers certainly goes up.
Agreed.
Bob had a question about using RMS offline, where you had mentioned that you were able to download documents and then upload. As he said, he thought that was currently broken. Have you tested that recently?
I understand there were some problems with it. I did a ride last weekend. We downloaded the RMS, and as far as I know, it's been uploaded back just fine. So there may be some. I know there have been some hiccups this spring, but my information was that they've been resolved.
Sandy Pigram asks, with all the social distancing, how do you coordinate locations of P&Rs and getting management there? Also, earlier you mentioned meals, etc., for management and volunteers. What are the suggestions for this virus at this stage?
Okay. One of the things we've been doing here in Region 5 in order to minimize travel and prevent loading a bunch of people up in trucks and exposing them, we've been coordinating the trails such that P&Rs are in camp. All of the PNRs at the rides I've been at this spring have been in camp. For the meals, the judge's meal, by the way, many of the observations are within walking distance of camp too, but then I shouldn't probably share that information. And so far as the meals are concerned, we're not doing any potlucks or any group meals. Everybody's meals at the rides this spring have been, because of COVID, have been on their own. When we do provide meals for judges, we prepare these meals in plates so that the judge just comes by and gets one of the meals. We restrict what else, Bill? That's basically what we've been doing with COVID.
In Region 3, it's and 2, it's my wife has been doing some leisure judging, and as a result, I've been her secretary. So if you can get related people to do some things, particularly it's judges secretary, or PNR teams, that helps. In Region 3 for a ride I'll be putting on, we can't do the PNRs back in camp. The trails just don't work out that way. But I do try to find large parking areas so people can drive them, so we can get a fair number of vehicles into them. Certainly, particularly last year during the peak of COVID, probably the main reason so many rides were canceled was because of the difficult. It's easy for riders and competitors to socially distance, but the problem was, how do you deal with the volunteers and the judges and keep them separated and healthy? And many of our volunteers are often older and so more vulnerable. Now that people are getting vaccines and things like that, it's becoming somewhat easier, but it's still a challenge.
But I think it's a challenge that it is going away, particularly with the announcement that the CDC is relaxing masking requirements in outdoor settings. And an NATRC competition is an outdoor setting. We haven't had, I haven't been concerned at the competitions. I think the measures that we've been taking are appropriate for what we're doing.
All right, we don't have any outstanding questions.
I have another one from the pre-questions here.
Okay.
Okay, ask a question, how do you know you're making the right decision? And my response to that is that you don't, okay? I have a philosophy in life, okay? I do the best I can today, and I will do the best I can tomorrow. And when I look back at things, I just accept that I did the best I could at the time. When an error or an improper decision is identified, I don't dwell on it. I just go into action to fix whatever happened. And then I try to put something into place to keep it from happening again.
All right, Bob's going to corner us offline about some RMS questions. I'm going to give people another minute to ask any questions in the
okay. I have another one. I have another one of the pre-questions, and I think this one is pretty relevant. And of concern to a lot of potential ride managers. The question is, potentially, how much out-of-pocket expense might the manager incur? And my answer to this is it varies, depending upon how tightly the budgets are controlled and how much entry fees are received. We're not in a profit-driven sport. We're focused on the enjoyment and education that we provide the competitors that come. I generally budget to break even based on the number of competitors anticipated. But that being said, as ride manager, there are certain things that I just consider a donation to the sport I love. Some examples of this include the many, many, many hours that I spend putting it all together, talking on the phone, emailing, working in the RMS, okay? Costs involved in pre-ride visits to the host site, planning, GPS work, and trail marking. I generally tend to absorb those costs myself. Also, any odds and ends costs not in the budget, I generally just pick those up myself also. This being said, as hard as you plan, break even, make some money, some circumstances such as weather could result in poor attendance where revenues really don't cover expenses. The ride manager is then financially responsible for covering the deficit. NATRC and often the regions have ride management support funds to help in these extraordinary instances, but they can happen.
I will comment some of the fixed expenses that I experienced before the ride. There's a $75 sanction fee for a full 2-day weekend ride. Insurance is $288. And then there's the airfare for the judges to get them here. Most other expenses can be, and meals are immediately before getting the food, that kind of thing. That can be significant, but most of the other expenses can be paid after the ride, whether you're renting porta potties, rider fees, writing the judges their checks. Those usually occur after you've actually taken in some cash and checks. Bob Insko also made the comment that the costs of volunteering, including mileage, they're often tax deductible donation to NATRC. Christian Johansson wrote a question. Once a ride is scheduled, must it be held no matter what, or can you cancel if registration is too low? I presume cancellation would still have costs. Would you still have to pay registration fees, judges, etc., or is there a time window in which you could cancel?
All of that is contingent upon how close to the ride you cancel. If you have to postpone, or we have a ride that I just found out last weekend for September that is either going to be postponed or canceled. They're going to incur very few in the way of expenses, even though that ride was on the calendar. As you get closer to the ride, you send in your sanction, you've sent in your insurance and other things, and so you do start incurring costs. And so all of those, that question is all relevant to how close to the actual ride date are things being canceled. The closer to that ride date, the more out of pocket the ride manager is going to be.
Let me answer this, because I've gone through this myself. As a general comment, ride managers, particularly if in RMS, if the number of attendees is very low and they're not able to see a break even, they will often set a deadline of like 2 weeks or 4 weeks in advance of the ride to have a number to decide whether the ride will be a go or a no-go. That will often happen. I have experienced where the ride manager I was working quit 3 weeks before the ride, and then the property owner called me the Sunday before the ride while I was ribboning the trail and was not happy with the arrangements. And I actually wound up having to cancel the ride on the Monday before the ride. It's a very painful thing to do. Most people understand. As soon as you can cancel, if you have to cancel, you want to. I believe there's some rules in the rule book saying it should be done 7 days in advance, but they're often extenuating. There are sometimes extenuating circumstances. I will say that the insurance company, my brain is locking up on the name of the
Equisure.
They returned 75 or 80% of the funds to me. I did take a hit, but it's you do what you have to, and people understand. The main issue when I was canceling was I wanted to cancel before people from Texas actually hit the road and weren't going to be able to turn around. Another question asks, what do you usually spend on awards and what type of awards?
Awards is one of those, falls into that category of budgeting items that depends upon how many entries I get. The more entries I get, the nicer the awards get. I generally budget $30 to $35, maybe $50 for a sweepstakes award. I'll budget $100 for ribbons, and fill in open writers and CP writers generally are okay with certificates. I'll get some nice parchment paper and make certificates for them. I'll go down and I'll hunt for donations of awards. I'll go into my local Tractor Supply when my buggy's full of horse feed, and I'll ask them if they'll donate some things. They've let me go back to their discount area, and they called it pennying out. So I bought things for pennies on the dollar. I make things. I know people that are handy with pottery and other things, and I'll ask them if they'll make something for the ride. I know there's a ride here in Region 5 right now that a lady had a bunch of 4x4 fence posts made, and she had to cut them all off, and she had 2 feet of fence posts and didn't know what to do with them. And one of the riders here volunteered to make chalks out of them. And so these fence posts that were not for anything are going to become prizes in one of our upcoming rides. Have I answered the question? Once I have enough entries, then I'm willing to go down and start spending some money for awards. But until then, it's what I can scrounge.
Bob Insko commented that where he's had to cancel a ride, the sanction and insurance can often roll over to another ride, probably the following year. He also says he likes to book with people on Southwest Airlines because they would generally have no change fees on the tickets. So that can help as well.
Yeah, and that is my experience also with the sanction and insurance fees. They can either roll over or transfer. I haven't had any problems with it.
Chrissy Colblath has asked if either of us would be willing to share a sample budget with expenses revenues outlined with us after the webinar. I'm fine with that. I'd have to find something, but
I'll be happy. Yes, I have budget templates that I go by. My template and my budget is geared toward, what does it cost to break even with 30 riders? What money can I spend? How much revenue will I have? And that's what my whole budget is based on.
And I think Paula is much more organized than I am, but I can pull together things, and the budgets tend to vary from region to region because we all have kind of unique expenses.
Water, porta potties.
Are there any other questions? I will give people a minute to finish typing or thinking. Let's see. Kristen Johansson has asked, I guess the big challenge regarding budgeting is that I have heard that people tend to register very late for rides. Anyway, any way to encourage earlier registration?
It's a quandary for every ride manager. We have a lot of people that will register, but not send in any deposit money and then not show up at the ride. At the ride I was assisting with last weekend, there were like 8 people who didn't show up, and most of them did not send in deposits. So even if they register, often it doesn't help you.
It's what we have tried in Region 3 sometimes will be to do early registration discounts, and with those, and some will, if you want the early registration discount, will ask for payment in full in advance to get them, or at least a more partial. what I tend to experience is if you have 30 riders signed up, I would expect on ride day to have 10 to 15% of them be no-shows for various reasons. And that could be because they didn't really want to come. It could be because they had a flat tire or trailer problems on the way. It could be because their horse came up lame or didn't get their health certificate. I just always assume that 10 to 15% are not going to be able to make the ride, depending on from the numbers you see in RMS. I'll give people a little bit more time to ask questions. Okay, I think we will cut it off here. I want to thank Paula Riley for hosting this webinar. I want to thank everybody for attending. I hope that some of you, I know some of you are already ride managers or secretaries I've seen in this list, but I hope that you put on another ride. We did have one additional question. Is it a good idea to do a leisure ride separate from the other divisions?
I think that varies from region to region. Here in Region 5, because we can have 30 to 40, we had 45 riders start our benefit ride a month or so ago. It becomes very difficult to manage a leisure ride and a traditional NATRC ride at the same time, unless you have two managers essentially handling two different events. We generally do not. We schedule our leisure rides on different weekends from which the traditional. I understand though other regions do this differently.
I've done a few of these myself. In Region 3, I personally like to have the leisure riders there the same weekend as the traditional AB riders. One, it gives people a chance to mingle, and we do try to shift the awards to try to get some interaction between the two groups. Sometimes that's hard because the leisure riders show up late in the morning and they're gone in the early afternoon while everybody else is still out on trail. It usually does take a separate ride team to manage and supervise the leisure riders. You need to have a separate judge and secretary, separate driver, separate safety teams. If you can pull them into the same PNR that you're using for the other riders, that can save you some volunteers. But it's all a bit of a juggling act, and it depends on your site and things like that. Again, I would like to thank everybody. We'll be getting a copy of this up online. We'll be getting a copy of this up online so you can refer to it in the past. Paula and I and any ride manager in the country is happy to answer questions. Feel free to contact us. Thank you very much. This webinar series is a monthly series that happens every fourth Wednesday of the month. Next month is going to be a webinar on electrolytes, and we'd like to have you all there, and please bring along a few other people who might be interested. Thank you for your time and have a good evening. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you.